Okay, and we are live. How's it going, Mets and overall baseball fans? Welcome back for the latest podcast episode of the Queen's Corner Pod. This is your boy Wardy, and no, that is not Rec. No, that is not Joe. That is a good friend of mine, and of course, another Mets co-host for the official Mets podcast and Mets Up, and Mark Luino, aka Giraffe Neck. Mark and I have a lot to get into in Mets land because it's a mess right now. This is the New
Yeah.
York mess. So I got a lot of things to say. I want Mark to kind of help me get off the cliff a little bit. I'm not at the cliff, but I'm walking up towards it. I'm like halfway through right now. And we got a big series starting this week, a Subway series in which we'll both be in attendance for both games most likely against those Yanks. Share some preview and raw reaction to that and really get into what is going on with the Mets right now. What has led them to, again, an abysmal road trip in heartbreaking fashion. Every single loss, it felt like, are there going to be changes on the horizon, either internally, externally, things of that nature? A lot to get into, and of course, answering your questions. So appreciate everyone watching live on the WardyNYM YouTube channel. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe on, or if you're watching on the 7line socials app, being in their Facebook or their Twitter, make sure to drop a like, a follow, and a comment, and we'll try to get to them throughout the show. But more than anything, Mark, how you doing today, my man?
Doing well, man. It's nice to get a night off from the Mets a little bit here before the Subway Series. I mean, I don't know how much more we can take of the play that they've had. So nice little breather and reset before a big series is something I'm okay with.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like the Mets could use as many off days as possible. They've been having them lately. Hasn't really led to much, but they, hopefully at some point having this whole off day thing will benefit them, right? And
Yeah.
as someone like yourself who again has been doing a great job with James Shiano and the Mets organization themselves for your podcast, I kind of got to ask what has it been like for your point of view, again, being a part of the Mets organization and seeing everything unfold. This is like the most adversity I feel like you've witnessed, again, being a part of the Mets organization and covering the team after every series. So what has that experience been like for you? And ultimately, how are you feeling about this club right now before we get into, again, everything that has led them to being the New York mess that they are?
Yeah, no, I mean, last year when we came in, I mean, it was a pretty good season last year. I know it didn't end well, but there were not very many tough episodes. Like, I mean, the Mets lost like a handful of series last year. I feel like, and it really didn't happen until the end of the season when it started to get a little ugly. So learning how to do episodes when the team is playing poorly for the official team podcast is something that's interesting. Trying to navigate those waters and trying to be fair as well as still give like a legitimate, real reaction from the fan base. It's just, it's a lot more fun when they're winning. I'll tell you that. Like, I still love doing the podcast all the time, but the episodes when they win, a lot more fun than when they lose. Cause it's like, we don't want to talk about them losing. I know there's some Met fans out there that like almost seem like they love when the Mets lose.
Frank,
But
sorry.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, something came out there.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to be one of those who I'm like, ooh, this is good content because the Mets lose. I want to make videos about how great this team is, not how poorly they're playing, which, yeah, it is a bit of a mess right now.
Yeah, I will say this, though. I know you came out with a video a couple days ago on your own Draft Nick Mark YouTube channel breaking down the Mets and why have they been free falling. And that was a great video, first and foremost. And you really highlighted a lot of things that all of us fans are seeing. Like, without even looking at the numbers, you can tell a lot of players, really a vast majority of them, are underperforming, either to a significant degree or just to a lesser degree. Because, again, you saw the Mets. They won 100 games during the regular season last year. They were at an all-time high up until down the stretch, of course, when it mattered most, unfortunately. But a lot of guys had career years. I mean, Jeff McNeil being the batting champ. Lindor, roughly 30 bombs, 100 RBIs, one of his best seasons of his career. Alonso having another monstrous season. I mean, Mark Hanna leading the league and leading the team, at least in hit by pitches. Like, those things went a long way. There were a lot of things that the Mets kind of rallied around internally from the early on in the season last year, and now it's like the polar opposite. It felt like not only between the players' performance, the mojo, the swagger, the confidence that they had, but also with the coaching staff too. I mean, Buck Showalter, it felt like he pulled every string right last year early on. Even when necessarily it didn't seem like it was going to be the case, you had guys exceeding expectations off the bench, right? You just had guys coming in, or even the bullpen too. Adonis Medina gained a big save against the Dodgers in LA. Like, little things like that went a long way, and it feels like the Mets have gone little to none of that so far this season, at least not nearly to the scale of what we were hoping for from what we saw last year. The Mets have had a boatload of injuries to start the year on the pitching front, and now they have plenty of guys healthy on the pitching staff, but they're just not performing well. I mean, it's Jekyll and Hyde every single time out there, between the bullpen being overworked because the starters aren't going deep enough, or the starters, again, say having a sharp outing, but then you're getting an inconsistent offense like we just saw against the Pittsburgh Pirates as the Mets again dropped 2 or 3 games. Now, game 1, I'm blaming on the pitching there because don't get me wrong. Yes, I know they didn't score much until the 9th, but let's keep it real. When you're already down, what, 10-2 before you even knew it, I'm not going to hold much on the offensive production there. Strong game there in game 2. Kodai Senga, in my opinion, had, you could argue, maybe not his best start of the season, but his gutsiest start, which is definitely something to build off of. Again, 4 walks. You had the error from Gourmet as well. You know, you bring in Luis out there for defense and you don't get it. Unfortunately, those things happen, like with Lindor the day prior. That spiraled everything with McGill. So Senga faced a lot of adversity, overcame it against 7 innings of 1 unearned run ball. So really proud of him there. And then Carlos Carrasco wasn't the best thing imaginable in game 3 of that Pirates series, but he was still, you know, at least usable. You know, it was under 5 innings, but he gave you 2 earned run ball. Again, got worked early. I'm aware of that. Had a couple walks, but the offense just wasn't there. Mitch Keller, of course, famously known for ending Marte's regular season last year that we all know and love. He carved up this Mets team. Again, really nice young starter, but you could just see the frustration and the adversity continuing with this club. So there's a lot of things I want to go over with you, and it's not to necessarily just nitpick the Pirates series, but it's the road trip as a whole. It's what we've been seeing all season long as the Mets currently sit 9.5 out of first in the division. I mean, who even cares about winning the division at this rate right now? It's about making playoffs. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, look at the Phillies last year. You know, look at many other runs from recent rivals going all the way back 2019 with the Nationals. So we've seen those stories. Hopefully the Mets build themselves one here heading into the second half before you know it. But let's just get into it. Dave, thank you so much for the donation. We're going to get into Luke Voigt and all that stuff. Same thing to Yoshima. Appreciate the donations, guys. But let's talk about just this team as a whole. You talk about inconsistency. I mean, if you're going to pick any team in baseball right now on the inconsistent spectrum, I mean, the Mets are at the tippity top of the list. There's no other ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I got to ask you, from everything that you've evaluated, especially, again, you've been at a lot of home games this year. You've seen them right before your eyes. The Mets, of course, have that 8-game winning streak at home. Then they came back home for that series against Blue Jays, got swept in, again, frustrating, heartbreaking fashion. So from that point on, what have you noticed that has either changed or has continued to get worse over time with this club on either the pitching, offense, or, of course, in between?
Yeah, I don't, you know, like in person, you don't see anything. You see these guys on the field like before the game, and they're all doing their normal stuff. They're all cheery. They're all smiling. They're all having a good time. But then during the game, I don't know, these guys look a little tight to me. I feel like everybody's pressing a lot. And granted, they should be. They're not playing well. They're very much underperforming. And I think they're very aware that they're not playing well. So it looks like everybody's super, super tight, which is something that we didn't really get to see last year until sort of the end with that Brave series. And that's just not what these guys are like. Like Lindor feels a little tight. Jeff McNeil looks, I mean, he's always tight, Jeff, but I mean, he looks a little tight. The only guys that really look loose are the kids, are the babies, essentially. Like Francisco Alvarez, that guy's having a ton of fun. But it's just, it seems like everybody knows that the season's not going well. And instead of trying to like almost like wake up and use it as a positive, it almost feels like it's become a little daunting and a little bit of like a dark cloud over the team in a way where it's like, man, nothing's going right for us. Like almost like a woe is me. During the game, the body language looks meh. It looks meh. It doesn't look great. Before the game, the guys have looked fine. But during the game, especially when things don't go their way, I feel like there's not as much hope as there was last year where, I mean, how many games last year did the Mets come back and win where you thought they had no chance?
Oh, my God.
This year, this year, it feels like when they go down, that's kind of it right now. And we did have that little stretch with the Rays and, like you said, with the Guardians, but I don't know what happened in that time. Obviously, losing Pete hurts us as well. I think that changes some of the vibes too, but it feels like everybody's really, really stressed out and pressing.
Yeah, I mean, you heard it from Lindor publicly in the locker room saying, you know, that like there's a level of concern. Like we're aware of this. I mean, we got to the point of after the Mets lost their 7th straight game, that being that first game in Pittsburgh, blowing out 14-7 or whatever it was, to the point that you had Buck do a closed door meeting, and apparently it resonated well with the team, according to Canna, according to Lindor. You know, I'm sure Buck said some things that are going to be kept private, and as it should. You could even make the argument that this was a little long overdue, but while I have had my very fair criticisms of Buck, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in the show, he's not at fault fall for everything here. And
No.
you look at the roster construction heading into the year, and with the injuries, the adversities, there's a lot of issues with this club at the moment. It goes from leading the NL or towards the top of the list and allowing home runs for one, which
Yeah.
is certainly not a recipe for success. A team that's based on $350 to $400 million trying to have World Series aspirations, like World Series, like it's crazy that this team had, again, this thought process, this mindset, these aspirations heading into the year, and where they sit right now, at least 4 games below 500, over 60 games into the season. But you don't only have the issues on the pitching front, which are the biggest issue. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that assessment? Right, pitching is the biggest
Yeah.
problem right now.
Because the problem is, like, relatively speaking, the offense hasn't been good, I think, but it's been just worse than we expected. It hasn't like truly been awful. Like they're probably maybe slightly below league average offensively. And if you have the good pitching, that's something that you can kind of cover up a little bit, and then you go and make a big acquisition, or maybe somebody gets hot and all of a sudden things start to look good. But when the pitching just doesn't even give you a chance, like 4 out of 7 nights in a week, it's really, really hard, one, to get hot, get in a rhythm, and get winning streaks, which is like something that they need. They just haven't really been able to run on a streak consistently this year outside of that home streak that we had. And even then, it was like split up between homestands. Like they haven't been able to put together a good string, and I really do think it's mostly on the pitching.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, the offense has not helped in any way, shape, or form
No.
either. I mean, Mets batting average, I'm pretty sure they're like 20th in the league. They have struggled with runners in scoring position. Again, a lot of things that they thrived off of a lot in the first half of last year. They're polar opposites. And something that I've noticed after looking through the numbers as well is this is a continuation. I know it's a new season, it's a new team, but with a lot of similar guys. But this is really a continuation, but from what's been going on to the final month and a half of the regular season last year heading into playoffs. I mean, if you look at the Mets numbers over the past 80 to 90 games, they're around 500 or below 500. So this isn't just one of those things where it's like, okay, the Mets, they're off to a slow start this year. No, I mean, this core group is very much the same. Yes, the rotation is quite different, and that has had its fair share of struggles. The Mets have yet to get 2 consistent quality starts from Justin Verlander. Kind of a big deal for a guy you're paying $40 million. Max has, again, had some nice outings, but also hasn't looked sharp, the guy that you want consistently either. List goes on and on. But the offense too, you see the continued issues with this lineup. It's like they have home runs. They had a streak of like 14 straight games with home runs, and they still had clearly a losing record. Or they're playing the ball and play a lot, and they just can't drive them in. It's like no matter if it's the offense having their internal struggles from, okay, we have the pop, but we don't have the contact, or if it's we have the offense, but we don't have the pitching. We have the pitching, we don't have the offense. Nothing has been in sync at all this year. So my question to you is, where do you think that this falls most on? Do you think that this is mostly a roster construction issue that we're seeing being exposed early on? Do you think that this is mainly just guys underperforming that are going to snap out of this funk? We just don't know to what degree. Or do you think that this is potentially more so on the coaching staff and maybe getting a little too comfortable after having a 100-win season? Like, if you had to nitpick maybe one thing that might stand out a little bit more than the rest, what would you say that is?
Yeah, I mean, going back to like the video that I did, I was really talking about, like, on the hitting side, I think the way that the Mets have built this team is like almost, it's tough to be really, really good all the time because like they're so built on singles. There's nothing wrong with getting your hits. Like, when Jeff McNeil won a batting title, he was great for us last year. But when those guys who are there to get singles aren't getting hits, it feels like it hurts even more the offense, because now there's like a gap of someone who moves the runners up, who moves the line going, where you have that extra base hit power. Like, the Mets hit a decent amount of home runs this year, but it also helps when you have Pete Alonso, Francisco Alvarez, and Francisco Lindor, who make up like more than half the home runs I think the team has hit. It's just the way that their offense is currently constructed, or the philosophy that they use at the plate, is just not really sustainable to give you an offense that's going to score a lot of runs, because it's really reliant on the team hitting as a whole. And right now, as we're seeing, they're not hitting as a whole, which is why they are having such a hard time scoring, because they're getting guys on base. They're walking. They're still getting guys on first and second in scoring position, like you said. But how many times have we seen a single hit with a man on second and he stays at third, right? And it's like hitting the gap somewhere. You might get 2 runs off of that instead of not getting any. It's tough to be built, or to have an offense built around singles, seemingly like the Mets have. I like the idea of being contact oriented, because strikeouts are theoretically like a waste of an at-bat because you can't really ever get anything positive out of it. But in the same regard, boy, would I love for the Mets to have a little more punch in this lineup for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you say punch because it's almost like the Mets, and again, you don't have to agree or disagree with me on this, but it almost feels like from the coaching staff that they're mismanaging a young player that they called up about a month ago, and maybe should be giving him more of a leash than what they have. Because again, Mark Vientos as an example, and I know we have people saying, I get my viewers all the time, they either love him or they hate him. They're like, oh, he's a strikeout machine, he's terrible, he's this and that. And don't get me wrong, Vientos hasn't been anything exciting since he's been called up, aside from that home run to tie the game against the Rays in his first game. I mean, he of course had a solid first game in Pittsburgh there, within the first RBI. The Mets were up 1-0 in that game.
Yeah,
I don't know if people realize that or not. Didn't last long, of course, but they did have the early lead. Not that means anything for this Mets team now, because early leads mean nothing apparently. But Vientos is a good example of that, because internally in the organization, there are not many other guys that have more power than what Mark Vientos does. No. There's a reason why he was quite literally, you could argue, maybe a little, I shouldn't say rushed up, because he was clearly ready. Again, 13 bombs in AAA after not even like a full 2 months. He's brought up. Why? Because the Mets had their inconsistencies. And since then, I mean, they just gave Daniel Vogelbach a leash for the next 2.5, 3 weeks, in which he provided anything but something, quite literally. Now he's finally starting to ride the bench, which I would hope that will continue to be the case. Nothing personal against Vogelbach. I've always liked him, always been a fan of him, but he's just not it for the team right now, especially the DH position. You need power. And that leads me to the head scratching move again. And I shouldn't nitpick just one thing out of a 2-1 Mets loss when everyone except for McNeil, who decided to be McHomer there with the lone run for the Mets, providing power. But there's something to be said about Mark Vientos, again, being pulled in that spot in the 8th, when he's one of those few guys that can actually drive one out if he barrels it well, versus having Guillorme, who's a slap hitter, has not been consistent this year, was sent down for a reason. The only reason why he's up is because of the transaction with Alonso being put on the IL, and he strikes out via pitch clock violation. And for anyone, because I've had people say, oh, what about the numbers? You don't know what numbers they're looking at. You're right. I don't know every number that the coaching staff are looking at. But for splits, no career hits. I think he's 0 for 3 or 0 for 4 now in his career against that reliever for the Pirates. And 2, just because a coaching staff provides a lot of different information doesn't mean it's the right decision. I feel like people get cooped up in that, because the Mets made this decision, that's absolutely the right move that they made. No, I mean, teams make mistakes. I mean, Kevin Cash will be the first to tell you that he should have kept Blake Snell in the World Series for at least another inning. It's okay. Managers have all the numbers, but it doesn't mean that they're going to make the right decisions all the time. So that kind of leads me to my point with this team and the frustrations, not only from the inconsistencies on the pitching front, but also in the decision making. And again, you've had a really close eye of Buck, since his tenure, because you guys have been both in the organization for about the same time, right? So I want to know, what has your evaluation been on the coaching staff, like Buck's decisions? Is there anything that comes off maybe different than last year to you in regards to how he's approaching things? Or is this basically still the same Buck that we've seen, but just things aren't going in the right direction like they were so well for a good portion of the 2022 season?
No, I truly believe that this is the same Buck. I think he's making the same decisions that he would have last year. I mean, every coach or every manager is going to make questionable decisions. You look at 162 games. There's going to be times they make mistakes. There's going to be times they make a great decision, 1,000 IQ. I just think that last year, some of the plays that maybe looked like 1,000 IQ maybe weren't the right decision, and they just ended up working out. Where this year, those decisions aren't working out, and when the team is struggling, it's really easy to forget all the stuff that went wrong last year when the team wins 100 games. It's really easy to find all the stuff that's going wrong now when the team is 4 games above or under 500.
Right.
So I don't think really anything's changed with Buck. I still think he's doing the same stuff. It's just now the outcomes are changing. It's probably unfair how well it was doing last year, and probably unfair how poorly it's going this year with how these decisions are working out. But yeah, that Vientos pinch hit one to me was quite a head scratcher. It just didn't really make sense to me. And I think one thing that's getting missed too here, and I know we talked about Vogelbach not really doing much, but if you're not going to hit Vientos, I feel like you got to hit Vogelbach there at least. That to me, if you want the left-handed bat, get the guy who I love Luis Guillorme. I think he's got a really fun little role with this team. But who do I want up at the plate, Luis Guillorme or Dan Vogelbach? I'm still picking Dan Vogelbach. At the absolute worst, he strikes out. We know he loves to look at pitches, but he does still walk way more than Luis Guillorme, and he definitely definitely has more power than Luis Guillorme. Like, there's no doubt about that. So it's like, to me, that was probably the one thing that like left me scratching my head. Was I would have just left Vientos in anyway, let the kid play. I think it's super important that if he's up here, he should be playing. But two, I can't believe Luis Guillorme was the first bat off the bench, or the best choice in that scenario for a guy who did get sent down because he wasn't performing.
Right, exactly. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, I'm not sitting here trying to, be in favor of Vientos with everything and anything. Look, if the kid's going to have struggles, we're aware of that. I mean, I know that's a different circumstance because he's arguably the best catcher in baseball now. But Alvarez was absolutely horrendous with his at-bats for over two and a half weeks. I mean, I had people close to me that are really big Mets fans, and people, that are very connected, like saying, I don't think he's it. And I kept telling them, he's 21. He's the youngest catcher in baseball. Just give it time, right? And we've given it time, and now he's, again, defying the odds before our eyes, which is so great to see. But that's the point I'm trying to make. That came with consistent playing time, playing at least 2 to 3 days versus being in a more limited role when he was first called up. Because once Nito was out with his injury, that definitely helped propel him as like, okay, he's the number one guy. He's going to continue to get as many reps as possible. And we're seeing him thriving. I know Beatty has had his growing pains naturally, but he has still been very, very solid in the hot corner. And again, the bat to ball skills hitting for opposite field is what I love so much about him. So he just start for him. But the same thing can be said with Vientos. You don't call up a kid who is thriving in AAA just to have him ride the bench as much as he has, and he hasn't had any chance to gain confidence. I don't think that's a wrong thing to say. Like at this. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I was gonna say, like, I had a friend who was in the Angels organization, Jabari Blash, and he was very much like a 4A player, ride the bench kind of guy, but always like had this huge power potential. When I was speaking to him, I was like, hey, like, what's going on? He goes, listen, like, I know I'm not Mike Trout. Like, I shouldn't be playing over him. I never think I will. He's like, but it's really, really hard to do my job when I get to play like once. I maybe get 4 or 5 at-bats a week. He goes, so I'm ice cold, because hitting on BP field, like on the field before the game, is nothing like hitting during the game. That's so vastly different. He's like, I know I don't need to tell you that. He was like, but I have my 4 or 5 at-bats a week that I have to prove myself to maybe get up to 7 or 8 at-bats in a week. He's like, so I'm fighting for my life to stay on this roster at 4 or 5 at-bats. And if I don't hit a home run, like, I'm basically like screwed. Like, I get sent back to the bench again until I get my chance one more time next week. He goes, if I got consistent playing time, he's like, I'm not going to be an all-star, but I'd sure as hell play a lot better than what you're seeing from my numbers right now. And I think that's something that is very similar to what's going on with Vientos. I think he has the ability to be a better player for sure. Not saying that he doesn't have all-star caliber stuff, but with Alvarez, even, like, remember at first it wasn't his position, and then they gave it to him. And all of a sudden it's almost like take a deep breath, relax. Like, I'm here. I'm a major leaguer. I deserve to be here. And the numbers started coming. And I really do think that could be something with Vientos too. One, there was so much pressure for him to be the savior when he got called up, of like, Mark Vientos, 15,000 home runs in AAA. Like, what's he going to do for us now? And then he gets thrown in, has a little bit of adversity, a little bit of trouble at the start, like we said, and then just kind of rides behind. And it's like, it's really hard for a young player who I'm sure is also still relatively nervous, still trying to, like, pressing, like, I want to do something for this team. I want to help. And when he gets those 3 or 4 at-bats every 3 or 4 days, he's really, really probably trying to overextend himself, get outside of the kind of hitter that he is. I'd love to see him play more. Like, if he's going to fail, I want to see him play and fail. I don't want to see him play every 3 games and fail.
Exactly. And the Mets are now in a tough spot because you could have made the argument that they should have been playing Vientos a lot as soon as he was called up, because now that they're 4 games below 500, it feels like now more than ever the Mets are going to be very adamant about trying to get certainties in the lineup, which I'm sure is what Buck is going to be favoring. Buck, of course, really appreciates the veteran presence because he himself is, one of the biggest veterans of a manager in the game. They always coincide. Doesn't matter what sport it is, whether it's hockey, whether it's football, whether it's soccer, whether it's this, they all apply. They're all coaches have the same exact mentality when it comes to this. And it frustrates me because, again, this was avoidable. The Mets, again, just gave him the leash that they expected. And it also makes me, and I know you don't have a comment on this, and that's perfectly fine because we're not going to know the answer to this, but it really makes me question the dynamic between Billy and Buck, because what was Billy's rationale to call up Vientos just for him to be in as limited of a role as he's been, now to the point where he may continue to be in a limited role, if not sent down, with the latest acquisition the Mets made today that we'll get into a little bit later, but of course that being former Yankee being Luke Voigt. So it's one of those things. It's like you bring up the kid, you want to see what he can do and provide.
Yeah.
And two, not that I want to see him dealt, but trade value is a thing. Having him ride the bench and then be cold and continue to have what has been piss poor numbers right now, it's not going to help us trade value. So I can't imagine that Epler and Buck are looking at this like, yeah, we're on the exact same page. So that's just something that's been definitely running through my mind throughout this process. And I'm curious to see if we'll see more publicly about that, or if that's just going to be left in my imagination. But again, in a nutshell, there's a lot of things going wrong with this Mets team. I don't want to nitpick Vientos as just that one thing, because there are a lot of other things. I'm just highlighting it because it's this continued thing on the offensive front that can be adjusted. It can be attended to, versus you only have so many pitchers, right? That's where the roster construction is. Like, we might not be happy with the pitching production out of the bullpen, but it's also like, as fans, our hands are more tied because it's not like the Mets really have better options. It's different when you see guys available offensively that may be a better option and just aren't given it, which is why I've highlighted it. My co-host Anthony Recker said it best. He had his best season in his career with the Atlanta Braves. Funny enough. And the reason why he did is because he was given playing time. For the first time in his career, he was with the team, and they just said, have at it. Like you're our guy. Like, we're going to give you at least half a season. And he absolutely had a really, really strong campaign there. And I want to say it was 2016. So just as one of many examples, as players just get that comfortability, say, hey, we're giving you an opportunity. We're giving you a go for, we're going to just give you a leash. See what you got. Don't feel that all the pressure's on you. Just go out there and play your game. And it does wonders for them.
Yeah, look around the league. I mean, Brent Rooker is finally getting playing time for the first time in his life. Like a dude who was the college player of the year at Mississippi State. He was a stud. Never got any playing time. When he did, he stunk. This year he's popping off. He's probably going to make the All-Star team for that team. Or even like, we're going to see Jake Bowers tomorrow and Wednesday. Jake Bowers was a guy who's kind of hopped around to a bunch of different teams, never really gotten consistent playing time. He's playing great for the Yankees right now. He's having a really nice season. Yeah, Billy Bonds. I mean, Billy Bonds, like all these guys, especially, I don't know, like there's something about like these highly touted players, I think, that like they need even more playing time. Like, there's going to be the unknowns that you always go like, maybe it's not them. But like, there was a reason Mark Vientos was taken in the 4th round, I think, of the draft, or end of the 2nd, whatever it was.
Right.
Like, he clearly has the talent. He's clearly got the power. I really hope that for this homestand he plays every single day. I think he should.
No, I agree with you. And I think big questions we'll find out soon as we get into our 2 segments from now is, what changes are the Mets going to do, especially in regards to Voigt? What does this mean for Vientos and his immediate future? Like, we have that to get into. But before we do, and again, appreciate everyone that's been watching live or on replay. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe on for the latest episode of Queen's Corner. And, of course, make sure to subscribe to Draftneck Mark on his YouTube channel. You guys all know him, so I don't think I need to shamelessly plug him because, again, he's here.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
You'll take it. And, of course, the Mets Up podcast with James Shiano is a beauty. But let's get into now. Obviously, you've had fortunate opportunity of really getting to know Steve Cohen to a certain extent. I know that for Messed Up, correct me if I'm wrong, that you guys were supposed to do an episode with him, but you're like, we can't do this, so you let Howie come in. Is that true?
Yeah, Howie took over on that one. Listen, Howie's a professional. He's in the Mets Hall of Fame. If Howie wants to do it, Howie gets to talk,
Yes. Yeah, he has just a little bit more edge there, to say the least.
A little more.
But Cohen, again, we all love and appreciate him and everything he's done for this organization. And, this is his first true test. The media is really starting to pick up. He did an exclusive interview just a couple days ago. I don't know. I think it might have been with the Post. I could be wrong. And
Joel Sherman.
There you go. Funny enough, I actually met him a couple weeks ago. Him, Brody Van Wagenen, and John Morosi just chilling in the Clover Gold at Citi Field. So that was interesting. But speaking of Cohen and his recent comments that he made, and not shocking, and if there are any specific ones from the piece that you'd like to highlight, by all means, please do. I just want to know what your thoughts are on them, because Cohen really said, yeah, I'm frustrated. Don't get me wrong. He's a fan. He's invested hundreds of millions of dollars into this team. He saw this team have a great, really above expectation season last year, but just had such a sour note towards the end. And since then, the Mets have continued to really struggle facing said adversity. They haven't been able to overcome it, whether it's from the coaching staff, the players, everyone in Houston. They've had those struggles, which has led them now to this point. And, when asked, should he go old Steinbrenner, just start doing a firing spree? He's like, I could, but is that really going to solve anything? He's like, that's not what I do in my day to day, with his hedge fund. I mean, I'm going to go on a limb and say Steve has made some good decisions on that front, which is why he's worth like $17 billion, right?
Yeah.
But the point here is that Okay, he doesn't want to be immediately reactionary and focusing on what is happening over maybe a smaller sample size versus what we've seen and what we could see for the remainder of the year. And then he would propose, saying, asking fans, okay, if say you want me to get rid of someone, let's take for example Buck. Who do you want me to replace with him? And
Yeah.
while I would say Eric Chavez would step in right away, maybe an outside pick would be Carlos Beltran, for example. But regardless, that's still a tricky thing to do mid-season, especially with the manager that just won Manager of the Year. Like Buck
Yeah.
has done a lot of great things for this organization from the culture change. So even to a lesser degree with the staff, it's like, is it really worthy and warranted of doing? Front office changes happen mid-season is simply not going to happen. So how do you feel about Buck's comments? Do you think that they're all pretty much, I mean, not Buck, pardon me, Cohen's comments. Do you feel that they're pretty much like all on the money in that sense from, him saying, don't get me wrong, I'm frustrated and things need to change, but I'm not going to be overly reactionary here. The same way fans will say want Lindor traded after having an 0 for 5 night. Let me know what you're feeling about his comments.
I mean, I think it's really important to have someone at the head who's thinking a little bit more rationally than just the average fan.
Just
I
a
mean,
little bit,
there
right?
are nights I'm sure we all say some crazy stuff about what's going on with the Mets. So it's like it's nice to know that he acknowledged that what's happening on the field is unacceptable. Like I think that's very important. And to me, that was something that I took note of was like Cohen is not happy with what's going on. He's not pretending like they're playing good baseball or getting unlucky. He's like, hey, it's not going well, not playing well. Like something needs to change. But I do think there is some truth to not blowing it up because relatively speaking, if you blow it up totally, you get rid of everybody, you clean house, it's pretty hard to come back from there. I don't know if like you're taking a page out of the Phillies book and you're looking for maybe just a new voice to be at the helm, but I think you probably give a little bit more leash than what's going on right now. Everybody's playing poorly. Everybody is underperforming. Like that's what the whole video I did was about, was that everybody is playing worse than they were expected to play this year. And I think if this continues for a more extended period of time, relatively speaking, 4 games under 500 isn't great. It's also not the end of the world. Like you can get hot and all of a sudden you're still like kind of right back in it for the wild card at least. I don't think blow up is the answer right now. I don't know what it will be maybe in a month from now, maybe by the All-Star break, maybe by the trade deadline. We'll find out, I think, a little bit more. I think a lot of these series coming up here at the end of the month will really tell us what's going to be happening. But he's a dude who's a smart guy who's made a lot of money. He's definitely, I don't think, a reactionary type of person. I mean, he seems to go through the proper steps with all the people that he's interested in. We didn't sign Correa because the medicals didn't come back right. Could have done it just because he wanted him, but the team said it's not good. Kind of has made a lot of sense right now. Even to not go sign Kumar Rocker or bring Jacob deGrom back because they weren't happy with what was going on. I think there's a lot of good process going on from that point of view. It's just now of getting the process on the field to where we want it to be. And I think blowing it up kind of just delays it a little bit more. I don't know if it's going to really have this automatic impact that a lot of people think it will.
Yeah, the reason why I'm actually in more so agreement with Cohen right now, and this is not me not trying to be, someone call me a bootlicker or something like that. I'm not trying to act that way. The real reason why I feel this way in regards to Cohen's comments is look at the roster. I think if there's anything that we can nitpick, like I will openly say, like I've defended Billy Epler with many decisions, but also I've not been happy with a lot of them, and mainly on the trade route. I mean the Mets. I mean, aside from Francisco Alvarez just taking him deep, we could all use a Colin Holderman right now, right?
Yes.
Even to a lesser degree, he hasn't been great. I feel like just a week ago he gave up a walk-off grand salami to Ozzy. I'm not. Was it Ozzy? No, Eddie Rosario, but Miguel Castro. Like it just. The trade front hasn't went the Mets' way since Epler has become GM. And now as we fast forward to seeing how this roster is constructed, I mean, his Buck's hands are tied in the pitching front. They really are. I mean, Buck has had to utilize basically 40-year-olds and Robertson and Ottavino so much, which is causing Tommy Hunter, who again was just DFA'd. We'll see what happens with Tommy. Love the guy, but again, he's had his struggles. But Ottavino, for example, last year only pitched back-to-back 11 times. He's already
Yep.
pitched back-to-back 7 times this year, and he hasn't been good. Surprise, surprise. A guy who's been inconsistent in his career is struggling now at the age of 38 when asked to pitch almost nightly. I mean, David Robertson has been a blessing to say the least, but
Yeah.
even D-Rob, I have genuine concern of is going to get gassed out bad as we
Yeah.
get into the second half because you don't have Diaz to be in that spot, which, of course, we could all use right now because Edwin is truly amazing. But the depth of this pen, it just feels like from the Leons of the world to, again, nothing personal, Drew Smith. I like the guy, but he's a guy that I personally, as a fan, do not love trusting in a lot of big spots. He's just one that I think would be great in a bullpen if a bullpen was deeper than what it currently is. And the list goes on and on with a lot of these guys. So, just the fact that we've had to use Muckenhern because guys were really worked up. Josh Walker, again, not that these guys are terrible, but there's a reason why they weren't supposed to be in this bullpen to start the year. And this is the type of issue where it's like, how much blame can you put on a manager, a coaching staff in that situation? I think there's something to be said about, in-game decision-making, because that's all Buck. I mean, that's as simple as day. That's why anytime that we see in-game stuff that frustrates me, it's because I know that this isn't like a group of people coming together to help build the lineup, which I'm sure is the case. That's my assumption, at least from an outside point of view. But in-game, very different. Buck's pulling the strings there. That's quite literally his job. That's what he's paid the big bucks for, no pun intended. So you look at all these things and you take into account what Cohen had to say. And that's why I feel that as of now, yes, there's a reason to be frustrated. There is a level of concern, not ready to blow up. But I will say this, and let me know if you agree or disagree. If the Mets are, say, between 5 and 10 games below 500 by the halfway point of the season, do you think that regardless of roster construction prior to any significant moves by the trade deadline, do you think that's really where you look and say, okay, something needs to happen for the sake of it happening and kind of sparking a fire under the team's ass? Or do you say, hey, let's just sit back, hang tight, and hope that we have the best trade deadline out of all clubs imaginable?
I think it's hard to say that I would choose to sit back and just keep hoping. Like, I mean, in my video, like one of the things was I was like, something has to change. Like, I think the Mets need to become more aggressive and they have to make change. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. So yeah, if the struggles continue and I was in charge, I think I'd be making some changes. We know I'm not in charge though, probably for a good reason. We really just don't know what he's going to do. And I think these comments and all these things that Cohen has been saying is a little bit of like I don't want to say like the hot seat, but I think it's just like everybody's on notice. Hey, just so you know, I've publicly now said that we're not playing well. I didn't say I want to blow it up, but I didn't say I'm not going to do it. I think it's more of like just put everybody on notice, make everyone aware what's happening is unacceptable and it needs to be fixed. And we don't have to worry about it. If we do have to worry about it, maybe something changes.
Yeah, this feels like the big boss giving a warning,
Yes.
and hopefully this is the only warning that he has to give out. I
It's a
agree.
yellow card.
It's a yellow card. Let's not get to the red card though.
Yeah, please no.
At least for people in the organization's sake. But yeah, that's where I'll leave things on that. Again, I was happy that he spoke out. That felt a little long overdue.
Me too.
Fans needed it as well. So we'll see what happens from there. But getting into next segment, which is our changes coming, and this doesn't have nearly as much to do with the coaching staff or internally in that sense, but it does have to internally when it comes to the players because
Yes.
I was driving home today. I pulled over on the side of the highway. Why? Because the Mets, of course, signed the one and only Luke Voigt. So that had,
By the way,
that had to be discussed.
Who else would pull over to the side of the highway to talk about a minor league signing of Luke Voigt? I mean, I know I did a airport video for Carlos Beltran, but side of the road for Luke Voigt, that's something else, dude. I gotta say, I tipped the cap there.
It's something else. Is it stupid? Probably, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes.
I was seeing 18-wheelers zipping by. I'm like, oh my god, this is giving me anxiety.
Yeah, no, it wasn't the smartest idea, but again, we got through, and that's why we're here. And Voigt, of course, who did a great job on killing the Mets with the Brewers earlier this year in that series sweep, was once compared to Alonso, if not better than Pete Alonso, if you ask Yankees fans, which I'm sure that they still mean wholeheartedly. Voigt, however, is not the guy that we've seen from recent years. Has pop in his bat still. At his best, could give you, again, 15, 20 home runs. Very Gary Sanchez-esque, former Met who's thriving now in San Diego. Good for him in that sense. But Voigt was picked up for the simple fact of Alonso's out for at least a month. You have your first base option, should you wish, if you want to call him up, or DH. But for me, and this was my reaction, this kind of goes back to earlier, I genuinely hope Voit isn't called up anytime soon because
Yeah.
I'd imagine it's the demise of Mark Vientos. And again, if you're going to send Mark down to give him consistent playing time, I'm not arguing there. Do it. I think he needs to be playing every day, regardless on what level he's at. So if that's what the Mets decide to do, then okay, so be it. At least he's playing every day, helps the trade value again, and hopefully build his confidence again for whenever the Mets say want to bring him up. But this move is interesting, still to say the least. So you got the Luke Voigt signing. You have the Mets moving up Luke Ritter, who I know you know plenty of, who's been thriving in Double A. Again, really, really great job with his offense and can play anywhere in the infield, first, second, third, without a problem. And we've heard a lot of rumblings, which I really want to know your opinion on, originally from Carlos Baerga, former Met, who reports sometimes he's right, sometimes he's wrong, saying Freddie Freeman's going to Toronto. But, he leaked out this time that, he believes that Ryan Mauricio could be called up as soon as this upcoming series against the Subway Series against the Yanks, which I don't think is going to happen considering Ronnie just had an MRI on his ankle flare-up. But I want to know, what are your thoughts about internally, not only with the offensive acquisitions as of late, guys potentially being called up, and two, Mike Vasile being moved up to AAA. I want to know your thoughts on that, because are the Mets going to be in a position this year where they kind of feel the need to rush up another starter in hopes that they kind of get lightning in the bottle because of how desperate they are for pitching? Is that a route you think that they will go down versus seeking external help first? Like, let me know what you're thinking on all these fronts.
I love Mike Vasil. I think Mike Vasil's really good. I think he's one of the better pitching prospects this year right now in minor league baseball. And you've seen the Mariners and a lot of teams just in general this year have kind of skipped AAA for a lot of their pitching prospects. Now, granted, the Mets don't play in the PCL, so it's a little bit different in the International League, but the Mariners, I don't believe, have allowed any of their young pitchers to pitch in AAA at all, essentially. Bryce Miller went from AA right to the majors this year. They just called up Brian Wu. I think George Kirby might have missed AAA, maybe even Logan Gilbert. And part of the reason is it's just that AA is a much more competitive league, while AAA does have more names that you'd probably be familiar with. AA is kind of where the competition and the real, just like actual players kind of grinding it out are.
Right.
Where AAA, like especially in the PCL, you get the crazy elevations. You get a lot of home runs. They're also rocking the automatic strike zone in AAA, which doesn't really do you any good when you get called to the majors. Like, to me, I think Mike Vasil should be on this team tomorrow. Like, if it was my decision.
That's a hot take. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, get aggressive. Get aggressive. Like, I don't really know what having Mike Vasil in AAA does for his development. And maybe that's just because I don't know that much. That's very possible.
Right.
But to me, I think he's shown enough in AA where you go, yeah, that guy's ready. That guy, I mean, he's striking out 30% of the batters, walking 5% or less. His fastball's up to 95, 96 with two really good breaking balls. To me, like, for a team that's just so desperately needs pitching, so desperately, I feel like Mike Vasil's a guy to give a shot. And I really don't think, like, let's say he gets shelled. Okay, send him right back to AAA. But what if you catch a little lightning in the bottle? What you catch a little spark like the Mariners did with Bryce Miller this year, and all of a sudden you got another piece in this rotation that you're starting to get really excited about. And he's like 24. He's not like 21, 22. He's a little bit older. Pitched at Virginia, which is like a powerhouse for college baseball. To me, a guy like Mike Vasil, I think, is ready to roll, and I want to see what he can do at the major league level sooner than later. But yeah, like the way that the Mets, I think, are using their minor leagues, I think they've been a little bit prudent, a little cautious in how they've been looking to call up guys. Like, I mean, it couldn't be more obvious that Francisco Alvarez probably should have just been catching last year, even like down the stretch for this team, because he's such a dog. But I think, like, if Ronnie's healthy, if Ronnie's ready to go, he's on this roster for me too. I think he could bring a lot of value to this team. DH him if you don't want to put him in the field. Like, that's fine. We talked about before, like, the DH has been a hole. Put him in the DH spot. Who cares that you have McNeil at second and Lindor at short? There's a spot that's open for Ronnie Mauricio. I'd like to see him hit. He's not probably going to be as good as everybody thinks. Like, same thing with all prospects when they call up. Just relax, take it easy, especially for a guy who doesn't walk. But his bat-to-ball skills have been incredibly improved upon this season. He's hitting the ball harder than anybody. He's hitting it similarly to Ellie De La Cruz, who is the coolest player in baseball right now.
Yes.
Like, to be in that conversation, I think there's no reason for him not to be here right now. And I hope that they call him up soon. I think they're probably not going to, especially like you said with that MRI on the ankle. I think you probably just let him get back to 100%. I wouldn't want to send up a guy for the first time in his career on a aching ankle. But whenever Ronnie is healthy, at least for what they consider healthy, he should be on this major league roster as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we would all love Ronnie. And it's funny because heading into the year, I didn't think that there was a shot in hell it was happening, even
Yeah,
considered this early on. But again, from seeing him dominate in the Dominican Winter League and then spring, phenomenal spring. I mean, he signed the inside of my hat when I met him, spring
hell yeah.
train. Really, really nice guy. Shout out to you, Ronnie. And then again, just tearing the cover off the ball. I mean, I don't know if he still currently does, but for a good period of time, he was leading all minor leagues in hits. Like, that's
I think he
something,
is.
yeah, that's something that can't be understated, right? So while he does struggle with the walks, gives me very much Ahmad Rosario vibes in that sense.
Yes.
It doesn't. That isn't the issue as long as the other guys in the lab do what they're supposed to. The Mets have guys that are supposed to be plate setters. So as long as they play their role, you're going to have a healthier balance of, your singles to your doubles to your home runs. And that's ultimately what this offense and depth of the lineup has been needing, right? So you get that, you get Mauricio, see what he can provide. Great athleticism for him too.
Oh,
Of
super
course,
athletic.
of course, needs more help there at second base. Has had his errors. It wouldn't be shocking if we see more of those. Left field, and that's where you can make the argument: is this something the Mets should consider now because of the hole they put themselves in? That's a fair argument too. Pitching is
Yep.
still the biggest issue, and that's why I would agree that as much as I would like to see Ronnie up with his team, I think there's something to be said about giving Mike Vasile a chance as a higher priority, maybe, if we
Yeah.
had to pick between the two. Because while I don't love the idea of just bringing up Vasile and say he gets, shelled like a Zappucki in San Fran last year, now turned giant, and then he's sent down right away, that's not good for his development or his psyche. So that I don't love. But at the same time, the risk reward is certainly there for someone like him who was quickly high rise from being, a little bit of a lesser pitching prospect to the Mets to now you could argue he's number one along with Blake Tidwell, Dominic
Yeah.
Hamill's right behind them. Then you have the Calvin Zieglers, et cetera, of the world, right? Not a lot of pitching depth, but what you have there is solid for what it is. And Vasile has had some really sharp outings there in Double-A, now moved up to Triple-A. And I agree because Double-A is where you have some of the best young talent in baseball.
Yes.
You see a lot of guys go from Double-A right to the bigs. That's often the case, right? So Triple-A is a mix of young talent that's on the cusp, but then you see a lot of guys that are just, they're too damn good to be there, and they're not as good to be in the bigs. They're stuck in this loophole, this baseball purgatory, if you will. That's
Yep.
almost instead of Triple-A, it's 4A. Like I
Yep.
don't know what else
Quad
to call
A.
it. Quad A. There you go. So to that point, I think you have a good argument there in regards to Vasile. And talking in regards to Luke Voigt, what do you think is going to happen with him? If you just had to give a hunch, the Mets clearly picked him up because of Alonso's injury. Do you think he's going to be a guy that's in AAA for however long it'll be, and maybe the Mets just have him for the rest of the year or part with him? For all we know, he might have an opt-out like Gary Sanchez did.
Yeah.
Let me know what your thoughts are on him.
Yeah, best case scenario, I think. Don't take this the wrong way, Luke Voigt, if you're somehow watching this. I hope you never play a game for the Mets. I really hope he never has to put on the Mets uniform, and it has nothing to do with him. It just means that Mark Vientos is playing well, and he's played well enough until Pete Alonso comes back, and then Luke Voigt doesn't exist. He's irrelevant because then you have your backup guy with Vientos, and I really do think, hopefully, that this homestand here is going to be kind of the litmus test for Vientos. Like, hey, are you going to be able to do something for us? You're going to hopefully play every game. I would love that. I would really, really love that. See how he does. It's not going to be easy because, going up against Garrett Cole and Luis Severino as your first two games of the homestand won't be easy. But I think he's a little bit of an insurance policy of at least this guy we know can perform at the major league level if needed. He looked awful, horrendous with the Brewers this year. He looked terrible. But if you look back to last year, he was still 94th percentile in barrel rate, which is pretty impressive. Like that's something that I think the Mets need more of. A guy that, yeah, he's probably going to strike out 35% of the time. But if he's able to barrel up a baseball once or twice a week for us, hit a gap, hit one over the fence, that's kind of all we need right now. We just need a little bit more pop. He definitely could be that guy. But yeah, would love to just hear that they cut him and he never made it to the majors with the Mets. It would bring a smile to my face.
Yeah. Nothing personal, Luke. We all
Nope.
love the jersey half unbun. You got it rocking. But let's keep it rocking in Syracuse. As we say that, he's called up for game one of the Subway Series against the Yanks, right? But okay, so we talked about changes coming if they're gonna come, right? So now let's get into talking about this upcoming series. And also, by the way, for everyone watching live on YouTube, apologies if there's a slight lag for either myself and or Mark. That's probably my doing. I haven't been on this computer setup all weekend, so it's like running hot right now, and I'm streaming on two different platforms. So apologies if there's a slight lag from the audio to the mouth, but you're watching, you're here. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, you'll be
But
fine.
let's get into the Subway Series now. Normally this is an exciting time. Us
Yeah.
Mets fans, we love it. Yanks fans love it usually. And There's just no mojo. There's nothing exciting heading into this, and I hate to be that guy. Like, I'm going to both games, but
Yep.
like I'm just like it feels more like I'm just going to two normal games. Like this even last year just had a swagger 2021 Lindor, out beating Giancarlo, for example. There's
Yep.
none of that now. Giancarlo's still out. Judge is out. Alonso's out. I mean, everyone and their mother's out right now. So I saw some people saying it's a battle of the mid in the chat, and you're not completely off. So you got Luis Severino, who's gotten beat up his last couple times around. So hopefully the Mets could take advantage of that. Game 1 tomorrow night against Max Scherzer. Last time Max pitched against the Yanks at Citi Field, he absolutely dominated. I was there in attendance. I think he struck out Judge, who of course isn't playing, like 3 or 4 times. Great
Yeah.
win. Marte had the walk-off win at Citi Field. Great atmosphere, great
Awesome
times.
game.
Really, really good game. Hopefully we see similar stuff like that tomorrow night. But Max is looking for a bounce back outing. I will give credit. And honestly, if I had to pick between the two, which guy I might have a little bit more confidence in between Max and JV, I kind of want to lean Max right now, only because Max at least showed in that Braves start, like he was on early. And it
Yeah.
was that last inning and a half when he really got beaten around and was getting barreled hard by the Braves. And for me, it was from viewing his location, really, really liked his fastball placement, but he was just hating the slider. Like the off speed just wasn't there. And that's something that I think he'll be better at, especially against a Yanks team without Judge, and is more vulnerable than ever because they're a team that many times, knock on wood, it looks like a shell of what they are without basically their captain. And this is a key test for the Mets too, without Alonso. How can they rally with the leaders in Lindor and Nimmo and McNeil, etc.? So it's a key matchup there for game 1. And then game 2, you have Garrett Cole, who's been off to a fantastic start this season. As much as I may despise the guy, I can't deny that he's a really, really good pitcher. And he's heading into Queens to face Justin Verlander, pitching matchup that, maybe if we excluded how the season has begun, like heading into the year, you would say, oh my God, like that's must see. And hopefully that's the case. I think JV has a very strong chance of bouncing back at home, bright lights, big matchup too against a Yanks team that he thrived off of. He single-handedly wiped the floor with them in the playoffs last year. So I'm hoping more of the same, has that familiarity during his many years with the Astros there. But got to ask you, what's your vibe? What's your opinion? And what's your prediction heading into the Subway Series?
Yeah, I mean, I always love the Subway Series. I know it definitely doesn't have the same pop as it has in the past, like you said, but I always get excited for it, especially just like as a content guy. It's a great couple days for me just to rile up Yankee fans. I haven't had a lot of opportunity this year.
You do your best Jared Carrabis impression.
Yeah, because the Mets have played so poorly, so I get to rile some people up. Hopefully, get a couple bites on Twitter here and there, boo some Yankee fans at the stadium. Like, I still am gonna have a ton of fun, but yeah, it feels a little bit different than years past. This is a familiar feeling that we have of where the Mets are not playing well and the Yankees are good, and we're coming into like a Subway Series. But the atmosphere is going to be incredible at the ballpark. It's going to be sold out. It's going to be packed. It's going to be mobbed. Going to be at both games, like you said. You'll be there too. So if you see us, come say what's up for sure. I always really look forward to the Subway Series just because I think at the absolute worst, I'd like to beat the Yankees and just give them a couple more losses to keep them out because while they are a good team, they are like still fighting for a playoff spot that's like very
for sure
not given to them with that, especially in that division. Everybody's competing for it. But I mean, you're there for the pitching this time. And I agree with you. I believe in Max a little bit more. Probably should have been pulled, honestly, earlier in the last start that he made, just because like the last 7 balls put in play were all smoked. And it was like, hey, I think they might have figured him out.
Like you're almost like there's a sign, right? If he's getting barreled left and right.
Did you not see how these balls have been hit? But yeah, he's been pitching well to a point, and I think he's getting closer and closer to being back, like you said. Verlander was concerning last start because it was so bad. It was terrible. But I'm not worried about him. I just want him to pitch better. Like I don't get a fear yet about Justin Verlander because he did sprinkle in that start against the Blue Jays. He had, the 10 strikeout appearance. Like he's shown us the ability to be very, very good. And it does seem like he turns it up for the Yankees. I don't know, something about them. I'm sure he hates them just like all of us. But the fact that we're just not playing great baseball gives me a weird feeling. But I'm also hoping that maybe the atmosphere will boost this team up. Like we've seen that they do kind of ride or die with the crowd every once in a while. Like the empty games against nobodies, and that's kind of play like crap.
Right.
The intense games where they're hype, see them kind of step it up a little bit. So I'm hoping that this wakes them up. They start to get a little bit excited and maybe start a winning streak here.
And that's the most frustrating thing of all, because that has been the story of the Mets for a while now. They have stepped up to their competition in a lot of aspects, especially on the offensive front. But oh my God, like I mean, the Rockies, like I want nothing to do with them. You know, the Detroit
No.
Tigers, the Nationals, like that's the worst thing to happen to this team. It was like the Mets. They started last year in the final month or so of the season, easiest schedule in baseball. We're like 2 games above 500. Not to
Why you gotta say it?
I know, not to rekindle those great memories, but the point stands. Is that still an ongoing issue with this team that they've yet to remedy? Like that's something that they're going to need to solve because again, they let a month this year just blow by
Yeah, gone.
like that, and that was the best month that they probably could have had all year. So it is what it is. They're going to have to grind and fight. The schedule's not in their favor down the stretch, and they're going to get anywhere. They need to prove it that they are not only a playoff team but a team that can win when matters most. And matchups like these are great. I'm looking at Francisco Lindor especially as another guy. He's thrived in the Subway Series that we've seen. Lindor has thrived in key matchups against big teams like the Braves and others too. And that's also going back to how this has been a mess for the Mets because they've had a lot of heartbreaking losses this year. You know, they looked like I feel like I felt for Philadelphia Phillies fans when they played the Mets last year. Like that's truly how it felt after that Braves series. Like for the Mets to be up at least 3 runs first time in history and lose all 3 games, especially game 3 in that fashion is like unprecedented. It really takes something special to blow that. But again, they were in those games, even against the Pirates when they lost a 2-1 ball game. Like you're just one hit away. It was like the Mets had those favoritisms for a little bit when they had the comebacks against the Rays and the Guardians. Like the Guardians, when they swept the Guardians, they were all 1-run ball games. Like that could have snap of a finger and they lose the series. So like things went on their side. Now things they didn't, of course, in big moments because the Braves thrive off of playing the Mets. We know that as the Mets do against them. But Hotland is just it's no good. It's bad.
Yeah,
juju
get him
there.
out of there.
Get him out of there. It's never good. But point stands, this big matchup. Hoping that everyone attends, has a fantastic time. Also, for anyone that enjoys being with the 7 Line tailgate pregame tomorrow in the Marina lot. You know the drill. Make sure to be there. I'm going to try to be there. I'm probably going to leave my place around 3 tomorrow, so should be there around 5:30. That's the goal. Okay. So hang with the 7 Line for a bit, then head into the stadium. Enjoy, hopefully, a nice night of Mets baseball. Then, of course, Wednesday night. If we get the series, series sweep would be great, but more than you just need to make sure you don't lose 2 straight. It's so important, especially against a Yanks team that's vulnerable. It would be a nice pick-me-up, if you will, if the Mets could try to take the 2 here. I did see a couple comments, and then we'll wrap things up. One was from, and that's baseball. Shout out to you, my man, who does great baseball content. He said like over or under like total 5 runs being scored this inning, this series. And honestly, it's a fair argument. Like with how these 2 teams are playing, I am actually going to go over though. I do think it'll be over 5 for sure. I think we're going to see a decent. I think at least one of these games will have a good amount of offense because. Not to be conspiracy theorist with baseball, but I'm doing my best Pete Alonso impression. I really do believe that these baseballs will be juiced, especially for nationally televised games. Like that's just how it is. You can't tell me otherwise. So I'm gonna stick with that until told otherwise, literally. And then Eddie with a $5 donation. Thank you so much, Eddie Krause, of course, the reigning kidcaster for the SNY booth last year. Shout out to you, Eddie. Hope you're doing well. Met him last year. Really, really nice kid. He says Voit is an Epler masterclass move. So that was his first reaction. Then after you describing, why we shouldn't play Voit, he donates $2 more and says, if Voit ever plays, I'm selling all my Met stuff.
Oh, no.
You're gonna have to sell your Met stuff.
Don't commit.
Don't commit. Don't commit. I appreciate the donation. Thank you very much for that, but don't commit. That's all I gotta say. He said Jed Lowry might go. He's through a wave of emotions right now.
Bring Jed back.
Bring Jed back, right? I should have brought up Lowry to when I met Bernie Van Wagen and just told him how much I really think he did a great job at that situation.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about my video from when we signed Jed Lowry. Definitely don't need to bring that one up.
No, we do not. But before we get out of here, Mark, any final remarks on this team as a whole right now with the vibes and really is there anything specific that you hope to see over the next week of games? You got the Yanks, then of course you got the Cardinals, who again have been not good. What's your thoughts on the next week plus for the New York Metropolitans?
Yeah, I want to see wins. At this point, we can't really keep doing the I hope they just play well kind of thing. I think they have to win. I think we're starting to get. It's friggin' June, I know, but we're starting to get into must-win territory stuff. You don't want to fall too far behind. I don't think the Mets are as bad as they currently are, and I don't think they were as good as they showed last year. I think they're right in the middle, which puts them as a wild card team right now. And I think that's something that I still feel comfortable saying that this team can make the wild card, But get aggressive, make some changes. Just don't keep trying the same thing over and over again, hoping that they just figure it out. Because I don't think that's the recipe for success this year. I think they desperately need to just be a little bit different than they've been. 30-34 is not good, or whatever the record is. 31-35, whatever. Like, just be better. Play better. Need some wins. And honestly, like, this is going to sound awful, but like, the Mets have had some hot starts to the year. What has it done for us recently? I don't know. Maybe playing like crap for the first 3 months. Like, maybe this is what we need.
Dude,
we saw the Phillies stink. We saw the Braves stink. We saw the Nationals stink. Maybe the beginning of the season's overrated. Like, if I'm gonna ever shill, this is gonna be my shill moment here of like, hey, it's still June, and as long as you make it to the playoffs, as long as you make it, you have to make it. If you don't, season's a failure. But if you make it to the playoffs, anything can happen. It's about getting hot at the right time, and we've been hot too early before. Let's get hot at the end.
Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with you. I've been saying that a lot lately to people. If there's one thing that I can hope for right now, it's the time of the year that we're in, and the fact that the Mets are facing so much adversity early on. The Mets didn't face anything like this where they didn't overcome it last year. And as soon as they just decided that, oh, we don't know how to play against bad teams in the final month, they were like shocked. Like, they just did not know how to react. So you got to hope that this early adversity will ultimately build them character and do them well down the stretch for when it's going to be most important. But again, guys, thank you so much to everyone that chimed in live or on replay for the latest episode of the Queen's Corner podcast. Of course, make sure to check out Draftneck Mark, as always, on his socials, on the YouTube channel, and of course, the Mets Up podcast with James Shiano. Mark, thank you so much for coming in, for being the special co-host today. I really appreciate it.
Dude, thanks for the invite, man. Always love talking Mets. Love hanging out with you. And I'll see you at the game tomorrow. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, we're gonna have fun tomorrow. So, guys, again, if you're attending, look out for both Mark and myself. We'll be roaming around, I'm sure. I think I'll be like all the way up top tomorrow, but behind home plate. I bought the tickets a couple months ago. Wednesday, if I'm there, I think I'll be behind home plate. So definitely gonna be a completely different view. So I'll be roaming around the stadium, no less. And again, 7 line tomorrow. Make sure you guys are hanging out there in the marina lot, and we'll see you then. Have a great night, folks. And as always, let's go Mets.